Thank you.
Excellent. And I'll turn the floor over to Amanda.
Oh, thank you, Bruce. Now I feel like a sure co-host for sure. Well, welcome, guys. Again, happy Friday Eve. We're so happy you're able to join us here with Bruce on Storytelling with Data. So, a couple things before we get started, just some best practices. Make sure if you have any tech questions, you please reach out to Shige. He'll be able to help you out on anything that you may have from your Zoom questions if you run into something from a tech standpoint. So, just ensure you directly message him, okay? In addition to that, in the chat, if you have a question for Bruce, especially if things pop up while he's going through his presentation here, please feel free to direct message Bruce as well. He'd love to address those towards the end of the webinar so that we can address the general audience with that question. That would be fantastic. So absolutely feel free to do that. Well, first of all, let's get started here. First and foremost, like Bruce said, hi, I'm Amanda. I work in the product area at Graduate School USA. I'm really excited to introduce Bruce today. He's an engaging trainer and program manager that brings more than 25 years of practical project and program management experience across multiple industries. He delivers um, effective training and has strong ability to connect with adult learners from a wide range of professional backgrounds. Here at Graduate School, Bruce teaches in areas of product management, data, and technology, helping federal professionals strengthen both foundational and emerging skill sets. He is particularly skilled at building stakeholder relationships and coordinating multidisciplinary teams to deliver real-world solutions. So please join me in welcoming Bruce.
Excellent. Thank you, Amanda, and welcome everyone. We are going to be sharing a one-page participant guide. You'll probably see that in the chat shortly. We're going to give people a minute or two to join us, but my name is Bruce Gay. I am very happy to be here with you today. The storytelling with data, data visualization, communicating data through reports and presentations has been one of the foci over the past couple of years for me. And I've I've had the pleasure, I guess, to train both federal employees across both defense and civilian agencies, as well as private sector. This is definitely one of the skill sets that if you are communicating, working with data, communicating to others in your organization or stakeholders outside of your organization, this is definitely a skill set that you want to spend some time to sort of level up. And the goal here today is just to introduce you to some of the offerings we have, provide some tips as well. And hopefully when you leave the webinar, you'll have a better feel for some small things that you can make changes for, but then also hopefully have wet your whistle to join us in some future training as well. So you'll see this diagram here, these Venn diagrams, the three circles. This will be on the handout as well. And when we look at what is involved in storytelling with data, as you can see, the storytelling is right here in the middle of all of these. And so the storytelling with data, really, it relies on data. So this is the information that we're working with in our jobs. The visuals, so typically what sort of charts, graphs, and tables that we are developing. But most importantly, one of the things that I want you to take away is that we need to have some sort of story to back up what and how we're presenting this information. And that is key because that is how we are going to be able to develop the storytelling aspect. We need to have some sort of overarching narrative to help us develop this the storytelling. So what I'm going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about what we're going to learn in the next 45 minutes. That's going to be both some areas of common mistakes that people make and show, some examples on how to improve that, but then also how a couple of areas and tips that you can walk away from today's webinar as well. And how this fits into some of the offerings that we have at the Graduate School USA. Now, as I mentioned, it's important that the skill of being able to tell stories with data is important. And as you can imagine, the first and foremost is helping you to advance within your career. If you're able to communicate better, if you're able to communicate more clearly the complexity of data and the multitude of data that you're working with, that is going to help you move forward. Secondly, we know that our customers, our stakeholders, our leadership are often very, very busy. They're juggling many things. They're needing to, they don't have the time to drop into the Excel files or drop into the data. What they're really looking for is how can I quickly understand the information that's being presented to me and then start to make decisions off of it. So having the ability to take complex data and tell a story with it is going to help you understand what's important. Now, one thing is you can read there at the bottom of this slide, the coursework that we're doing, you do not need to have advanced Excel skills. This is really positioned for individuals that are comfortable working with Excel, individuals that are comfortable with perhaps doing pivot tables or perhaps not, but then also those that are just able to start working with charts. And what we're going to cover today is a little bit about what storytelling with data means. As I mentioned, we're going to cover some mistakes that may weaken your message to others. We're also going to look at some quick wins on how to boost your clarity, focus, and readability of charts. So I'm going to give you a couple examples there. This is primarily in highlighting trends, making comparisons, and emphasizing key takeaways so that your audience can quickly see what is the purpose and the point of this data. What are the insights that I should be taking away, and how can I use those insights to make better decisions or understand the information. Now, I've got a question for everyone. There's actually too many people, so we're not going to, normally a smaller group, I'd have you put this in the chat, but I'd just go ahead and reflect on this. Think about how comfortable are you with presenting data to your leadership or stakeholders within your agency? Are you very comfortable with doing this? Are you somewhat comfortable? Is this an area that you know you want to work on a little bit and you're not very comfortable? Or the bottom level there, you avoid it whenever you can. So this is a skill. I can tell you earlier in my career, I was doing a lot of work with spreadsheets, and it was through practice, and it was actually through trying to understand my audience and my stakeholders is how I became more comfortable. So this is definitely something that you can improve over time and move from that bottom level, which is I avoid it whenever I can, to, hey, I've got this. It's definitely something that I'm very comfortable doing. So again, this is just for you to reflect on. And these courses are really to help you to get further up in the level of comfort. Now, why is the storytelling with data? Why is it important? Why is it really something we need to focus and think about at work? First and foremost, data by itself does not drive decisions. So let me repeat that. Data by itself does not drive decisions. It's the interpretation, the clarity, and the insights around that data that help drive decisions. And your leadership, your stakeholders are really looking for those insights. They're looking for, hey, I've reviewed the data. Here's how we've analyzed it. Here's what it's telling us. And here's how we should move forward. And so you don't want to, just dump the data in someone else's lap. You want to be able to help them see what's important, see the story, and have them understand what's going on. Now, data storytelling also involves, and it's heavily founded on solid visualizations. So if you have incorrect or messy or poor visuals, this is going to slow other people's understanding, comprehension, and the ability to make decisions. So when you have clear visuals and a clear narrative, this is going to help with quick, timely, and defensible actions that you're trying to propose. And we all use Excel. Excel is really one of the strongest tools that we can use. It's not advanced. It is definitely something that most of us have access to as well. So I want to touch on why do some of these data stories fail? And what are some of the common challenges that we see? And again, I'm using Excel as the tool here. And good analysis often fails because there isn't a clear narrative. So insights that are getting lost without understanding the bigger picture, the context, or the purpose that they're being surfaced, or if there's a visualization or data that's being presented and the audience isn't able to see what is most important and what matters most. So it's our jobs to be able to help visualize, emphasize, and make sure that the right information is being surfaced and emphasized so that people see what matters most. And data without an underlying story really leads to inaction and perhaps even confusion. So when you're doing this analysis and reporting, we need to be thinking about what is the story that I need to tell here? What is the story that the data is telling me? Does this match what our organization needs? And how can I make this more understandable? So these are often by not having the narrative is when we're not going to have clear data. As I mentioned, our leaders and stakeholders, the reality is they have limited time to review and interpret complex information. They're often juggling many different things. They've got competing priorities. Um, they may be interrupted in virtual meetings. They may have multiple things going on. What they need are focused insights to help guide them. And by having those focused insights and having those stories, it will help them to gain faster understanding of what decisions they need to make. And it's part of our role to make sure that we're doing that analysis and surfacing up the stories. So again, this is taking our audience and the leaders, the stakeholders, our customers into account. We need to assume that they are time limited, that they're juggling things, and they need data presented in a way that is easy to consume and act on. So storytelling with data is defined as the project of combining data, visuals, and narrative to clearly communicate what the data means, why it matters, and what actions or understanding should follow. And so here again, we see the Venn diagram. So we're looking at the visuals, we're looking at the data, and we're looking at the being able to have an understanding and a narrative of it. And so when this is done properly, we have a clear message. We also are able to share the context with our audience. And then there should also be some level of takeaways that they would understand. What is it that the audience, whether this be your stakeholder, your customer, your leadership, what do they need to do next based on the story that the data is telling? All right, so use the thumbs up if this is making sense so far. Is this logical? I want to make sure that folks are sort of tracking along here. Seeing a lot of thumbs up. Thank you. And I'm sure many of you are already quite expert at this, but I'm just helping to sort of polish the stone here a little bit. All right, so we all use Excel. Excel is really one of the most widely available tools across federal agencies. We've had Microsoft Office on our systems for quite a long time. And it's familiar to analysts, it's familiar to program staffs and project teams. Uh, uh, Excel is excellent at analysis, it's excellent at quick visualization. We're able to share it, update it, reuse it, and it is often the starting points for our reports and briefings. I know there's other more expert tools out there, but we're sticking with Excel here today. But Excel has some pros and cons. It has some strengths and limitations for storytelling. So among its strengths, it's flexible, it's accessible, and it's quick for analysis. It handles all the basic sort of visual types that we need. There's tables, charts. Um, it has even more complex charts. It has pivot tables if you need to move in that direction. But some of the cons is that just using default charts in Excel will give you a chart. It'll color it properly, but won't really tell the story. And we'll see how that sort of is a reality. And then often Excel sort of props up the users, meaning us doing the analysis. We're able to overload our charts with too much information. And it's really best practice to make sure that these charts have the right level of information and make them more simplified, pulling out information that's not necessary. But Excel doesn't do that off the bat, and we're often not taught that either. And Excel it's very powerful when it's paired with good design, meaning charts and tables, as well as an underlying narrative for the context, the why, and how, what actions we need our audience to take. All right, so let's talk about some common chart mistakes in Excel. And I'm guilty of these just as much as anyone. And honestly, part of what I want to do is bring awareness to everyone here today so that we can start seeing when we're taking these mistakes and make the corrections. All right, so the common mistake is just to use the default charts choice in Excel. So the example here is that we've got a data set, and we've highlighted the data set, and we've done insert chart, and it'll say insert recommended chart. And boom, we have very quickly now, we've got this chart. But is it really telling us the story that we expect? So let's look at this example right here. This is one that I've pulled together. So it's got all the right parts. It's got the dates at the bottom, pretty clear to read. They're done by quarter. The y-axis, pretty clear. So you got that. But then now we're looking at this data. So it's giving us, I guess these are divisions. So we've got an East division, we've got a Central division, we have a West division. But when we look at this chart, it's a bit messy. It's not really telling us anything. And it's diluting the message. And so one of the things that I want to point out here is that the titles and the labels really are not telling us what we need to know. And so for example, when we look at the label here, some of East, some of Central, some of West, this may not be clear to some audience. What does that refer to? And then even the title up here, Division Studies Completed Quarterly. This is a very generic title. It doesn't lead the audience to any sort of insights. I mean, the only thing I can quickly see is that there are some of these peaks that East appears to be doing um, at these intervals. But there's clutter here. There's sort of a lot of different things that's going on. Now, I'm not going to redo this chart, but this the key insight that I would say that I'm finding here are these peaks. So there's something happening here in the fourth quarter of every year that East is something's going on with East. Likewise, Central seems to be peaking in quarter two. Now, this Central one here seems to be peaking in quarter three. But one of the stories you could say here is there seems to be a peak or a high period or completion happens at the end of the year for East, while mid-year seems to be when Central completes their work. And it looks like West seems to also peak and complete their work Q4. Now, that's a different story. That's basically telling you now that we have work that's being completed, and most of it is being finished in Q4. And that can actually be, that would be a much more powerful story to tell to people based off this data. All right, give me a thumbs up. So far, so good. Let's try not to use default charts. Part of what we're going to want to do is select the chart, think about what our narrative is, and then go in and edit the title, edit the labels, perhaps even change the color of what's going on. Good. All right, so let's move to the second common mistake. Here's just another one. All right, too much information. This is when we're overloading charts. We're just taking everything we have and we're blasting it out. And you may think that you're clarifying, but often when there's too many things on a chart, it is going to cause cognitive overload, and it's going to blur your main point. One of the things to learn from this is less data means more clarity. So I have it written differently there, but more data often means less clarity. You're going to want to have less data. So in this case, we took some sales information and we turned it into a chart, but we've got everything from looking at sales for furniture versus office space versus technology. It does good for it's all in one place, but it doesn't really tell us a story. So the fact that this is all in one place, you get to see everything, but then the question is, okay, why is this data important? What's going on? And so in most cases, you may want to segregate out perhaps something like technology and just show that information. And then you can even say, okay, we've got East as a region has the most spent or sold in that particular, or pardon me, West. It looks like West is the most. So there's more story here. There's more available in this information. So my second recommendation is to veer from having too much information, because that's going to blur what you're really trying to get your audience to understand. All right. Now, this one is another common mistake. You may have generated a chart that was appropriate for the data, but the chart itself doesn't explain, what's important. And as you can see in this one, it basically says line graph. And so it doesn't tell us much. We know from the labeling here, these are two different years, but it doesn't really tell us anything. And what this is really doing is you're putting the burden on your stakeholders, your customers, your leadership to interpret this. So in fact, you're making them do your job. And so what you really want to do is take this and have it be supported by a narrative, supported by a direction and a story that you want the information, and you want the title and you want the labels to reflect that. So this is just another common mistake that happens. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, we don't need advanced Excel skills to avoid these types of mistakes. These are areas where don't use default charts in Excel. We want to make sure that we are just providing the right amount of information, not overload it. And then third, we want to have that focus. What is the story that we're trying to tell? And so what I'm going to show you now are a couple of quick wins that you can start using based off of some of these areas. And I'm hoping that these are some quick wins you can apply, this week, next week, or whenever you have to do your next report analysis or otherwise. All right. So first one, improve your clarity by using titles that really clearly and specifically state the main message. A second point here is have the chart labels so that they're easy to interpret. And in fact, you may even want to, and you can see this here on the right, have the chart labels so that they're in the chart if needed. Remove elements that don't add any meaning and keep only what supports the primary takeaway. All right, so let's go back to this over here on the left. We've got the chart that we had before that was divisional studies completed by quarter. It looks like a fine chart. It's got data. It tells us there's 3 different divisions. But this right here shows us now our key message. And it is part of our title. So we've got East Division studies spike each quarter 4. And one of the things that was done even more so, East here is blue because it matches the blue that is in this in the chart. And if there is some importance to the numbers, as you can see here, we've labeled the peaks with the values. And what that has done is we've now been able to remove this y-axis. So the y-axis before wasn't didn't have that much cognitive load, but this is a much cleaner chart now that is really around, just pointing out what are the key information. The East seems to peak at the end of each quarter 4, and then it gives the values. And if you notice too, these horizontal lines have been removed. A lot of modern charts, really more robust and more advanced charts, look like what we have on the right here. There might be a little bit of a cleanup on the x-axis, but they typically don't need to have all the lines going across them. And then as well, you can see they've color-coded and they've annotated each of these. So you don't have to have this label set up off to the right or below it. It's now embedded in the chart. So a couple of quick wins. First, make sure that your title states the main message. This takes a little bit of practice. It feels a little awkward at first, but my recommendation is if you know what your story is, think of a 4 or 5 word title that matches your story. I mean, another example here, instead of East Division studies spike each quarter 4, we can say East and West divisions are most busy at end of year, something like that. There's different ways of phrasing this. We've now removed some of the elements that we don't need. And then we've also just kept the information that's necessary to support our story. All right, let me see with thumbs up. So far, so good. Clear. Is this logical? Is this example a good one that you can perhaps replicate? Now, do know in our training course, we would actually have several examples that would work through exactly like this. I'm just showing you the high level, but in our classes, you would be practicing this, and it does take a little bit of practice, but it's a skill that we can all work on. So wonderful. All right, here's another quick one. All right, improving the focus and working on readability. Now, this is a big one. This is not one that I learned until probably 5, 6 years ago. So when we're given charts and we're given graphs in Excel, it will normally pick and choose the colors to give us. And that doesn't always help us with our narratives and our stories. So what you want to do is use color sparingly. You don't want to overuse color. You want to keep your formatting consistent. And you also want to make sure that things are easy to read and there's no distractions. And the top one is you want to be able to guide your audience to the most important insight first. So, what we see here, again, we've got a set of data. This gives us the number of correct answers for each of these individuals. They're labeled from the least. So poor Eli probably did not pass this exam, but Allison met it with flying colors. Everything's pretty, I mean, this is a good chart. However, it's not really telling us a story. It's not very advanced. On the right, we're focusing on what is really important here. So there, you needed to have a passing score of 35. This was sort of missing over here on the left-hand side. And so this is an element that I drew on the graph. So this is a line that I added to the graph to sort of give the focus. And this is at the value of 35. And so I saw at that point, both David and Allison passed this course. And what I ended up doing was making sure that their bars were highlighted, so a darker color, and then I suppressed the color on the other students in this class. So in a way, this is to reduce the noise. And the goal here is to really have you focus on, okay, who were the people that that passed this exam based on the number of correct answers. And as you can see, I went from a bar graph that was vertical to one that was horizontal. The horizontal are often quite easier to read, especially when you have this type of numbering here at the bottom as well. So again, using color and shading to focus the eye, adding an additional call out right here that was a different color. It was sort of a highlight color. This could have been orange, something that would have just drawn attention. So it draws attention to this point. And then also, formatting the title here so that it not only has a title, but it also includes a subtitle that provides some information. And so you can very quickly look at this chart, see where, if this was something where you were looking at performance metrics or some sort of quality, you can quickly say that, scores need to meet such and such amount. You can quickly have that in the text here. So all in all, guiding your attention to what's important. So let me ask again. Give me a thumbs up. So far, so good. Does this seem like an interesting thing to try out with your data and reporting that you're working on? Good, good. All right, here's another quick win. So you want to be able to highlight your trends effectively. So you want to be able to show how they're changing over time. You want to be able to keep your intervals of time consistent, and you want to start axes at the appropriate baselines and avoid any sort of scaling of that axis that would distort your story. So first and foremost, always check, are you starting with a zero? Is it starting with a zero here? You don't necessarily, unless there's some really strong, compelling reason, to start with a different number on this axis. So always start with the zero. Um, and then, as you can see, these are laid out. They're labeled correctly. You can see where there are, where the data points are. Now, as you know, in Excel, and I'm not going to show this here, there has a way to sort of set up what do you call it? A trend line. So you can actually, there's sort of a default function within um, Excel that will allow you to see a trend line. So you can turn that on and off for different data, and that really helps you sort of come up with a better narrative. So in this example, I would say that the title here isn't written very strongly. So if I was looking at this, I would say that the story here could be um, the new customers in Europe climbed throughout 2015, but then sunk in, I guess that's November. So sunk at the end of the year. So I would I would have a much more explicit title up here because it's clear we're seeing this sort of trend going up. But then, to be honest, all of these regions seem to have this falling period here right at the end of the year, and that is something that you could actually include in the title. You could say, all three regions experienced growth during the year, with the exception of the last month of the year, and that is something that would help to highlight the trends effectively. Good. So another tip is that we want to be able to show comparisons that matter. We want to use the proper chart types. I really highly recommend people using this horizontal bar. This is one of the more advanced. It's more easily readable. You want to limit categories to sort of make sure your visual overload, your cognitive load is not there, and that you want to align the scales to make sure that there's a fair comparison. And so, as you can see in this particular example I built here, we've got here's the title. It's the same market, but we have different outcomes by the companies. These are all different companies. Revenue growth rates differed widely across companies from 2022 to 2024. So, what this is telling us is that right off the bat, there weren't clear trends for these five companies that we were starting to look at. Now, what we did see, and maybe this is something you call out, this ABC core and high top, they started out here and ended up here. So there might be a different chart you'd want to show where these two have the highest growth. Um, and that's a different story. That's not really this chart here doesn't tell you the story of who had the highest growth or the most rapid growth. This is just showing you a comparison. So I would almost say that if you took this is step one, but I'd actually take a second step to show the growth rates, specifically calling out these two companies because they've got the fastest growth from 2022 to 2024. And that's actually the more important insight to share with your customers and your stakeholders. Because once you've highlighted these two companies have had the highest growth, then the next question is why? What was being done that supported or enabled that? And that leads to further, information that you may need to find or further learnings from the data as well. All right. The other thing is you want to make sure that your key takeaways are clearly called out. So state your takeaway, state your main the thing you want your audience to take away in the title. As I mentioned, it's a little awkward at first, but it does something. It's the first thing that people see when they look at your chart. They're going to look at your title most often. If not, they're going to be looking at a call out color that you've used in your chart. You want to emphasize and highlight what's the most important thing in the chart. Again, you can do that by bolding something. You can shade it darker. You can use an accent color. You want to de-emphasize any sort of supporting details. If you recall back to the chart I had a lighter shade. And then you want to be able to connect the key points, the key takeaways to the next steps or a decision that needs to be made. So, obviously, if you're showing that this was an insight, you want to show to your stakeholders and your leaders, here's the next steps that we have to do. And you want to make it easy for your audience to know what you're asking of them. So if the report is showing where there's additional information that needs to be identified, or if there are underperforming units, then you can call that out and say these, based on this analysis, and it clearly shows these are the areas that are trending in the wrong direction. All right, so you've taken the first step. You've joined us here today for this webinar, but obviously, this storytelling, visualization, and narrative building is a skill set that we can all sort of continue to build on. So we've got a course that is storytelling with data using Excel, and the goal of this course is to help you to take raw Excel data, turn it into clear and compelling stories. And we'll practice that. We'll also be looking at what are some of the fundamentals of data visualization and design, and how do we apply those principles to these visuals, charts, and other graphics that we are using to communicate something, usually to communicate something very complex to our audience. We'll be looking at how to choose the right chart. Some charts are better for some data than others. We'll practice how to reduce clutter to make sure that there's clarity and that there's focus for your audience. So just like the example I showed. And then also how to highlight the key insights. So these are all the things that we go into much more hands-on depth exercises as well as practice during this course. And individuals who would benefit from this are people who are really, their job is to create charts, to create reports, or build dashboards in Excel. This is often analysts, program, policy staff who are briefing both internal and external stakeholders. You may be an analyst who is supporting performance measurement, budgeting, or oversight. And then obviously project staff, acquisition staff, and IT staff who are really trying to take data that we're collecting and translate that into better decisions. But the bottom line is anyone who is responsible for collecting, analyzing, interpreting, and communicating data in order to support your agency's mission, that is really what this course is geared for. And so the goal here is we want to help you make your data be easier to understand and easier to act on. All right. So some takeaways from today. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Um, having good analysis is going to fail unless you have a good story or a good focus for it. Storytelling with data means that you have a message, you understand the context, and you have decided on what are the takeaways you want your audience to have. Excel charts are powerful, but we need to be more intentional with how we design them and how we communicate with them. And just some small changes. I showed you several small changes in the small wins that can help with clarity and focus. And lastly, better visuals lead to better understanding and decision making. So these are all key takeaways from today. And we offer several related training courses. I don't know, Amanda, if you're going to be able to drop these into the chat, but there are some links that we have for these. Data storytelling with Excel. It has the catalog number is Tech 7080. So that's one of the big ones. We have multiple Excel classes and boot camps that are both live and self-paced. The data storytelling with Excel is that is live. So that is one that you would have with an instructor, most likely me. And then we also have more advanced data analytics courses. And so these are courses that help analysts, help people who are doing much more advanced work as well. All right. So I didn't catch if we shared our, yes, we did. So this is the participant takeaway from today. Again, I want you to remember that data storytelling is at the center of understanding the data, building the right visuals, and having a narrative to support it. And this worksheet here really gives us, I've broken it down to match the different areas that we've looked at today. I've also added a couple of questions. So I want you to think about this. Things like, what is your audience reacting to? What have they reacted to in the past? Are they getting the message that's behind the data? And if you can't answer that properly, then this may be, an area you need to work on. Another question here is, what is the single most point your next chart needs to communicate? And this is a good practice. Just think about, what is the one thing that you really need to tell your audience and have them act on? And that is what you focus on and simplify everything else. We talked about the common mistakes. We're all guilty of doing these. So sometimes these show up in our reports. And then lastly, it gives some of the quick wins that you can apply as well. But I'm hoping that you find value in that participant guide, quick handout that we have as it covers everything for today. All right. So I think we've still got a couple more minutes left. And Amanda, help me understand, how do we, it looks like I've got a couple of direct messages with questions. I guess that's the format. So we'll have anyone that wants to ask me a question, send it to me directly, and I'm going to try to see about how. All right, so we got a question from Stacy. So if you want to make 2 points, East studies spike in Q4 and Central peaks in 2, would you repeat the same chart twice, but with different titles? That's a good one. Give me one moment here. See if I can go back to that and give the better example here. So I think my recommendation is you don't want to have too many charts. You want to keep, obviously, you want to keep the reading for your audience. I would say use something like this and try to change this title. So I think if you were saying, if we did indeed wanted to point that Central peaks in the middle of the year, we could say East Division spikes in Q4 while Central spikes in the middle of the year. So your title could reflect that. So I would just have one chart and just add additional text to it. All right. Let's see. We've got let's see. Do you have scholarships or tuition discounts? I think I don't know if I can answer that one, Amanda. I think do we have a program that people can is there information on our general website on scholarships? I don't know.
That's something I can put the support email in here in case they want to ping that just to get more clarity.
All right. All right, I got a couple people who said they've signed up for one of the boot camp courses. Excellent, excellent. Any more questions? I'm not seeing any more questions coming out from the group. All right. So, Amanda, if you're not seeing any questions, I want to thank everybody for your time today. I hope that you've been able to learn at least a couple of tips and small things that you can start using in your own analysis and reporting and discussion of data. Look forward to working with you in the future. This is obviously one of the areas that we can all work on. And want to thank everyone for your time and have a wonderful week.
Thanks, guys.